The only other thing that we want you to know on this edition of Business Plus has got to do with the finances of all the state governments in India. Because according to Shamika Ravi, member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council and the RBI, which put out the state's financial health report, many states in India have an extremely high debt to GDP ratio. In fact, the overall debt of all states combined is set to go up 9%, going further to over 87 lakh crore rupees. So how well are states' finances being managed? Are the right states being given the funds, and are they putting those funds for the right use? Those are the big questions that come up when you look at that data. Kartik Malhotra continues to be with us. Kartik, we always discuss, what is the levels of GDP that every state puts out. That is a isolated number. If you have a high GDP, fantastic. The more important part is, are you being able to generate that high GDP with as little debt as possible?
Absolutely. I think it's a question of how are you financing your growth. A state like Kerala, for example, which has an higher than average growth rate, GDP growth rate, still has a much higher than average debt, which is financing that growth. Now, what really happens in this entire process, Krishna, is that you've taken this debt from the central government. That debt doesn't come for free, doesn't come very cheap either. So there is an interest that you pay to the center over that debt, which restricts your ability to plow back that money into real development to create jobs and development to actually further bolster your growth.
All right, we have Mr. Srinath Sridharan joining us live on this broadcast. Srinath, I think we're going to stop discussing this amongst ourselves and help. You've been, researching this. You've even written pieces for us. You're doing a two-part series for our news9live.com website as well. Tell us from your perspective, from where you sit, how do you view the state's finances? Because the finger is being raised against states like Kerala, which have an extremely high debt to GDP ratio.
So, Krishna, a little controversial statement. It depends on which finger is being raised. In the mainstream reaction, right? That's a challenge. Most of the states have been announcing schemes, grand schemes, almost populist schemes, without, I think, worrying about the consequence of these debt. End of the day, the states have to continue repaying these. And one of the interesting aspects is the state GDP is a direct correlation to amount of money that the states can borrow. And I think somewhere the Finance Commission, the 16th Finance Commission that is to be formed soon, I think is going to have an actual issue on hand. How are they going to actually negotiate with each of the states to reduce such a limit? Because otherwise, states just are getting reckless without building a revenue moat of sorts. Most of the states, like you said, Kerala or Punjab, have been living off on the conventional revenue streams they've had for years. Let's say tourism, in Punjab's case, agriculture. But are they becoming competitive? And the challenge is you also have to compete within the other Indian states and union territories to attract whether it's investments or talent. And the reason why I'm saying talent is very important. Without talent, you don't get the share of the GST of the services that they will use in those states.
Right, Srinath, stay with us. Since we're talking so much about Kerala, we thought we'll get somebody from Kerala to get some perspective. We have the former Finance Minister of Kerala, Mr. Thomas Issac, now joining us on this edition of Business Plus. Mr. Thomas Issac, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. Simple question: do you agree with this hypothesis that Kerala's finances have not been maintained properly? In fact, one of the the least maintained well of the states in the country.
No, nothing too much need to be drawn from this. For the simple reason, there's a National Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. And therefore, if a state has higher than national average debt servicing ratio today, it only means the impact of legacy debt, which over time, because now no states can borrow more than 3%. The ratio in the long run would come down. There is nothing to be so worried about. In fact, if you look at the ratio, the trend in your graph, you'll find for Punjab, Kerala, and all these states, 5 states, where debt ratio is relatively higher, or the fact that their legacy debt is relatively higher interest rate, But this is a temporary phenomenon because the basic borrowing, future current borrowing and future borrowing is limited to 3%. It will come down automatically unless they are all going to break the law, which is not possible. You cannot borrow without sender's permission. Therefore, I think there is nothing to be worried about. But we should take note of this and keep your watch. That's all.
Okay, we shouldn't make too much of this latest set of data. Srinath, would you agree with that, not to make too much out of it, and then the levels of borrowing will only come down going forward, according to Mr. Thomas Issac?
See, I think hope cannot be a strategy, right? Especially around financial and economic matters. I'm not a politician, so I don't have to promise any electorate or anything. The reality is, if you spend more than you can earn, you are going to be running into trouble. So it's as simple as whether it's a personal finance matter or the state finance matter. And most of our states have lived on legacy and borrowed money. They'll have to figure out, can they be attractive as a destination either for investors or for visitors or tourists like Kerala or Goa for that matter. And how are they going to continue attracting newer people to come back again and again and spend money with them? It's as simple as that. But yet it is very, very challenging because states have conventionally thought, if I provide roads, if I provide education, if I set up hospitals and colleges, things will
That's exactly what Kerala
shape up
has
beautifully.
done.
It is just not going to achieve at all, right? I mean, every state does not have equal resources, natural or man-made, and that's a reality. And each of the state has a unique competitiveness that they have to leverage for their own growth.
All right,
I mean,
right.
Kerala has, let's say, Ayurveda or tourism, beautiful, but can they scale it any further? The reality is, if you're creating a strategy for a corporate, you will figure out that at some point in time, your numbers will plateau. You
Right.
can't say it will constantly grow like a hockey stick effect all the time.
Srinath, that's right. Let's take it back to Mr. Thomas Issac and let's understand from him that this money, which needs to be invested back for larger growth, where should this money really be invested? Should Kerala now move away from traditional sectors and look at sectors like manufacturing or IT, for that matter, to actually reap the dividends of growth?
Well, let me put it this way. Last 2 years, the own revenues of the state government in Kerala has increased by 22% per annum. That is an astounding pace of growth. Now that GST has become operational, it has just become operational only now. In the sense, Kerala is dependent upon IGST more than SGST because 70% of our consumables are being imported from other states. But the e-way bill system and so on has come into being in the firm only in the last, say, 2 years back.
Right.
And now I am very confident, optimistic about Kerala's buoyant own revenue growth, particularly if the central government is willing to tweak back a bit of the tax rate which they reduced in 2019 before the loss of election. If that is not fully restored, at least tweaked, I think state of Kerala, I'm sure, is going to have a much more buoyant revenue. Therefore, I look forward to the medium period as a phase of fiscal consolidation for the state. That's my expectation about Kerala.
All right, that was Mr. Thomas Issac, former finance minister of the state of Kerala, joining us here on Business Plus. I'm afraid we've completely run out of time here with that. Thank you, Mr. Thomas Issac, for joining us. And of course, thank you, Mr. Srinath Sridharan, for joining us and giving us your perspective on the health, the financial health of states in the country.